morning and welcome to Football League World TV. My name's Ned Holmes and today I'm joined by Alfie Burns on the debate show to talk all things Bramall Lane and discuss whether Paul Heckingbottom is the right man to lead Sheffield United to promotion. How are you doing this morning, Alfie?
Yeah, very well, thanks, Ned. Seems a bit strange being on this side of the panel for a show on Football League World TV, but I'm looking forward to talking about the Blades and what's going wrong for Paul Heckingbottom's side at this moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Alfie, you've been down to Bramall Lane a fair bit over the past few seasons, so we felt it was best to get you in the experts chair rather than presenting this today. Before we get started, a reminder, as always, please do like and share this video. Subscribe to Football League World TV on YouTube, and of course, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Well, Alfie, obviously, I'm going to take you back to last November. Paul Heckingbottom appointed after the sacking of Slavisa Jokanovic, Blades 16th at the time, and he'd lead them to a fifth place finish in the playoffs, of course. A hugely impressive season, given where he came in, given that Sheffield United had come down. But let's talk about the appointment on its own. Were you surprised at that point to see Heckingbottom given the job, given he'd had a fairly underwhelming, brief spell as caretaker boss?
Yes and no. I mean, Heckingbottom was in the club, wasn't he, as the under-23s coach? And actually, when you looked at that sort of caretaker spell in charge in the Premier League, it wasn't that bad in isolation. There was some decent results in there. I think they beat Everton at Goodison Park. I think I'm right in saying, and he knew the players as well. So he'd worked with a lot of the players. The squad hadn't been completely overhauled. So it wasn't so much of a surprise in that there was quite a little bit of talk about when Sheffield United first came down that he might get the job after that caretaker spell in the Premier League anyway. So no, it wasn't a massive surprise to me, no.
I mean, they made a strong start to the season. I think we were all sort of earmarking them as the best performing team in the Championship through the best part of those first 2 months. But now a run of 6 games without a win. As I said at sort of the top of the show, you've seen a lot of Sheffield United since they came back to the Championship. Can you put your finger on what's changed really in recent weeks and what's been the cause of this drop in form?
There's probably a couple of things, really. I think, firstly, it's not getting talked about enough. The sort of injury crisis that Heckingbottom's been having to juggle. It's only the fact that he's got such a strong squad built that the team still looks really good on paper. But defensively, they've lost some really big key players in recent weeks. I think the other week they finished a game with Rida Kadra and James McAtee playing as wing backs. And they are attacking, forward-thinking players. They're not wing backs. Ben Osborne's having to fill in at left wing back recently as well. Sander Berg's injured, and taking Sander Berg out of any side in the Championship would really hinder them. So there's injuries. That's probably a big thing for Heckingbottom at the minute. He's missing some key players that he'd have in his starting lineup. Another thing that sort of stood out for me is become a little bit of a talking point in his press conferences recently. The style of play that clubs are adopting when they go into Bramall Lane. In particular, he was really critical of how Birmingham came and played, and QPR as well. He thought that their time wasting and their tactics were pretty poor, and he had some quite hard evidence that he went to the referees with. So I think Sheffield United need to find a way to overcome that. But for me, I think the thing that really stands out is the injuries more than anything, and it's really sort of key players missing that make such a big difference. The likes of Berg in particular, maybe an Ender Stevens, a Max Lowe, Jayden Bogle. These are all players that would probably be starting games, and not having sort of 3 or 4 of your regular starters available is always going to impact results.
Yeah, as you say, a little hamstrung by that injury crisis. But I think a lot of fans of other clubs and probably managers of other clubs would look over at the players he's got available to him, and with a fair amount of jealousy. He's starting to get a bit of criticism from fans about his team selection. I saw there was a lot of outrage on social media, in particular ahead of that Norwich game when the lineup came out. Do you think that that's fair, or is this more a case of sort of fans' frustration sort of going to their heads a little rather than reflecting on the fact that so many games are coming thick and fast before this World Cup break?
Yeah, I mean, potentially, but every fan base has fans that criticise the manager's decision. It doesn't matter what division you're in, what level you're at, what you're competing for. Not everybody, when you've got a fan base of, 30, 40,000 people, they're not going to agree with everything that Paul Heckingbottom does and every decision that he makes. And I've seen some of the criticism of how he's not moved away from a wing-back system, given he's having to put sort of square pegs in round holes with regards to his wing-backs and things like that. But kind of hark back to Slaviša Jokanovic, who had a 3-5-2 squad, and he was wanting to play them in a 4-3-3 system. So I can understand why Heckingbottom is sticking to his guns with what he's doing in terms of his system and not moving away from a 3-5-2, 3-4-3, that kind of wing-back approach. Also, I mean, a lot of the criticisms come with who's leading the line. Ollie McBurney's in great form, and for most people, looking at his numbers recently, he should be starting and playing 90 minutes every week. He's been that good in front of goal, but he's carrying a hernia problem, which Heckingbottom dropped into a press conference quite recently. He's having to manage the minutes that he's playing, and that's kind of like the pressure that comes with the job, isn't it? That he's having to manage these players and manage expectations, and he's going to have to manage that criticism that he's getting from supporters with regard to his selections. And I think it's probably a sign of how strong Heckingbottom is, that he'll just shut out that outside noise and sort of, he's the expert when it comes to picking the team. Nobody knows those players better than him. So yeah, I wouldn't be too critical of the selections that he's making at the minute now.
Fair enough. Well, we talked at the top of the show, that strong start to the season. I believe is back-to-back Manager of the Month awards for Heckingbottom to start 2022-23. Blades, of course, as we've said, struggling a little bit now to pick up those wins. Do you expect him to sort of pressure to build on him anytime soon if that winless run continues, or do you think he's got sort of plenty of credit in the bank given what he delivered last season?
Yeah, it's only natural that pressure is going to build. I think that he's been managing under pressure the entire time he's been at the club. He needed to turn things around. There was no room for error when he took charge at Sheffield United last season, really. If they were going to get back up into the playoff picture, they had to deliver a run like they did. So he deserves enormous credit for that, which obviously then leaves him with credit in the bank. But it's only going to be natural that pressure builds if these games, without a win continue. There's five games left before the World Cup break. I think I'm right in saying, and I think we'll come on to it later on, but there's some really good opportunities to get back to winning ways within that run of games. So yeah, pressure will build if the wins don't come, but plenty of credit in the bank, and I think plenty of good opportunities coming up to get back to winning ways.
Yeah, one of the things I think that was notable from my side, probably for you as well, as someone that is often at the games and at press conferences, I think it was 80 minutes plus the wait for him to show up for the Norwich post-match press conference. Do you think that suggests to you that there are issues are starting to show in the dressing room, or was it more a case you feel that he just was keen to use that time to sort of, I guess, keen to use that time to make the most of the turnaround they'd seen and really sort of get stuck into his players?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to second guess too much of what's going on within a dressing room, and I'm sure that during this season there's going to be words in the Sheffield United dressing room. Sorry about that. I think my doorbell's ringing in the background. There's going to be words between players, but that's going to be the same in every dressing room up and down the Championship, isn't it? So yeah, I wouldn't read too much into that. Also, got to point out that there's some really strong individuals in that Sheffield United dressing room: Billy Sharp, John Egan, John Fleck, Chris Basham, Oliver Norwood. That's just to name a few. For me, looking from the outside in, that's a dressing room that can almost manage itself. The journey that they've shared going from League One right up to the Premier League to finish 9th in the Premier League, to coming back down to get into the playoff semi-finals like they did. There's some strong characters in that dressing room, and I wouldn't, say that Heckingbottom will have too many issues with his players there. You also don't know what his sort of approach after the game's been. Has he wanted to have a word with the officials? Has he wanted to have a word with his players? 80 minutes is a long time to not come out for your press conference, but it's also quite a short time if you've got quite a bit to do, particularly with other media duties and that.
Sure. Well, let's just sort of look on the wider Championship as a whole and how that sort of compares to Sheffield United. Despite that poor run that we talked about, 6 games without a win now, Blades are still 5th in the table, still just 4 points back from league leaders QPR, and with a fair few games sort of coming up ahead of the World Cup break, things could look pretty different in a few weeks' time. How do you, Alfie, look at that squad and rate it in comparison to the other sides in the Championship?
I don't know if this is because I see them so much and I've seen them so much over the last 18 months, and I saw how they turned things around and just became sort of a winning machine last season at Bramall Lane. But for me, it's probably the best built squad in the division. There was a real effort over the summer to bring in a quality of depth. You know, there was plenty of quality already there, but more depth has been added. For me, I think the starting 11, minus where Morgan Gibbs-White would have fit in, is better than where it was 12 months ago. The bench options are better, even though they've got injuries at the minute. They're still able to field a really, really strong 11 most weeks. And yeah, I think the only player from last season that you're potentially looking at is being sorely missed is Morgan Gibbs-White, and he is, of course, a special talent as he showed at Bramall Lane. And don't get me wrong, there's some really good squads in the Championship. I think the way that Burnley have built is really good. Watford have got some star quality. QPR have got some really good players. You know, that there's some good squads, but for me, I don't think there's any better than Sheffield United. I think Heckingbottom's really well equipped to deliver and build on what he did last season.
Yeah, it's obviously it's one thing to be too well equipped, and as I sort of said earlier, you know, that there has been some frustration amongst some fans about perhaps the way he's using the squad, the way he's using his players. Do you feel like he's getting the best out of them? Perhaps unfair to say at the moment, given it's a bit of a dip in form, but having seen a lot of him, obviously you saw some games under Jokanovic as well. You touched upon Jokanovic's attempt to sort of change formation with the squad he's got. Do you feel like we're seeing Heckingbottom really, you know, have we seen him get the best out of this squad? Is he capable of getting the best out of this squad from what we've seen from him?
I think there's probably a couple of ways that you can look at it, and I think overall he does get the best out of the squad. He got the best out of the squad last season, and he got the best out of the squad in the opening couple of months of this season. He knows what works for them. He knows how to motivate them. You know, he put them back in a system that they all knew, and they did the basics brilliantly. You know, they got back to, you know, making Bramall Lane a fortress. They were first to second balls. They were strong in tackles. They played attacking football, which the fans absolutely loved. And, you know, that was playing to the squad's strengths, and it got all the fans back on board. So I think history over the last sort of 10, 11 months tells us that Heckingbottom can get the best out of these players. Has he got the best out of these players in the last couple of months? Obviously not, given the way that the results have gone. But again, just looking back on those injuries, you know, injuries have started to pinch and results have suffered. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think if you gave Heckingbottom a clean bill of health with regards to his squad, he'd deliver and he would get the best out of these players, because we've seen there's no evidence to suggest that he can't, because he already has.
Yeah. The Championship this season, I think ahead of the season, we all perhaps felt that there weren't as many, I don't know, teams that you felt were really lined up, looking sort of ready, set to secure promotion. There were the likes, of course, a couple of favourites in the likes of, you know, Watford, Burnley, Sheffield United as well. But it's played out exactly like that. I think, you know, we talked a lot about it, but it certainly looks a wider open Championship than we've seen in quite a few seasons. As I said, you know, beyond perhaps Burnley, it's hard to pick a real front runner that you feel were definitely going to be up there. You'd say Sheffield United would have been sort of in that list as well, ahead of this little drop in form. To add to that, it looks like we could have some big clubs come down from the Premier League this season, given how many clubs are struggling up there and the size, you know, and the history behind some of those. In that sense, do you think that this season, the 2022-23 campaign, represents a sort of a huge chance for United to get back up to the Premier League, particularly given perhaps the age of a lot of the key players in this squad?
Yeah, definitely. And it's like you've already seen my notes there, what I've written down, because that's basically, you know, what I was going to say. It's a massive opportunity. There's no standout side in the division, and in another 12 months' time, as you sort of alluded to there, we could have some real competitive squads coming down that will be heavy favourites to bounce straight back. And sort of as you mentioned, there's no guarantee that Sheffield United's squad's going to be anywhere near as strong as it is in another 12 months. I mean, I wouldn't like to write off some of some of those characters in the Bramall Lane dressing room. You know, I think there was plenty of that going on 12 months ago that they were finished and they proved everybody wrong. But this is a big opportunity. This championship season feels very, very strange in that it's going to be so competitive. You know, and we don't often see that. We often see a couple of sides that are nailed on for 1 and 2 in the division. So it's a huge opportunity, but that's not just for Sheffield United either. That's for what QPR will be looking at, what Burnley will be looking at. You know, even what sides like Watford who are you know, looking up to get into that sort of top 2, 3, 4, 5 places. You know, everybody will see it as an opportunity, which in some ways maybe makes it harder, but kind of look at what the division could look like in another 12 months. And I think that this is a big opportunity for a club, particularly like Sheffield United.
Battle back to a 2-2 draw against Norwich, as we said, 2 goals in to come back into that one and earn a point. And now they face next a trip to out of form West Bromwich Albion. Obviously another big club, but certainly one that's underachieving at the moment. Still managerless. Looks like Carlos Corberán might be going in there, but yet to be seen. Do you think, on the back of that sort of the second half turnaround, the way they bounced back against Norwich and what looks perhaps not an easy game, but certainly a winnable game against West Brom coming up, could this represent sort of the start of an upturn in fortunes for the Blades?
Yeah, I mean, just touching on the Norwich result and the performance and how they turned things round, I don't think that kind of battle and determination within this squad is something that could ever be sort of, you know, cast as a negative on them. Really, I feel like they do have a real will to succeed and you know, play for the manager and play for the shirt. I think, you know, they want to be the best that they possibly can in front of the crowd at Bramall Lane, and that was even evident in the 3-3 draw with Blackpool not too long ago. You know, they are coming from behind to battle for points even during this sort of winless run. And then looking ahead to the West Brom game, I think it's potentially an ideal fixture going away from home and going to the Hawthorns, because, you know, we know that there's plenty of unrest at West Brom at the moment. You know, if they haven't appointed a manager, the fans are going to be critical of that. You know, if they have appointed a new manager and say, is somebody like Corberán in, there's going to be extra pressure on him to hit the ground running and get up and running straight away in what could be his first fixture in charge. But beyond that, there is some really presentable games, as I touched on earlier before the World Cup. Bristol City, Cardiff, Rotherham, 3 of the sort of 5 fixtures that they've got coming up before the break in mid-November. So there's plenty of opportunities to get back to winning ways, including this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looks like a run there that, as you say, if they can put together a few wins there and a couple of the teams above them or around them drop points, things could start to look really sort of, well, a lot rosier for Paul Heckingbottom. And certainly, as you say, if they can, even if they stick around where they are now and they get some of those key players back after the World Cup break, it certainly could be a good time for them to push back up the table. Well, based upon sort of your arguments so far, I think I know what your stance is going to be on this. But obviously, the stance of this, well, the focus of this debate show, Alfie, was whether we felt, or you felt, Paul Heckingbottom was the right man to deliver promotion at Sheffield United. So I want to get from you your sort of your closing thoughts on that.
Yeah, in all honesty, and I've sort of touched on this already, I don't think there's been enough evidence to suggest that Heckingbottom isn't the right man for the job so far. I mean, it'll get levelled at him that he's never taken this step up into the Premier League as a manager before by winning promotion. But look at the likes of Chris Wilder, Steve Bruce, you know, just to name a couple recently, and it's not really a trend that bringing in this manager with a proven track record of promotion is working in the Championship.
Yeah.
At the moment, and just going back to sort of last season, you know, the belief, I spoke to Ollie Norwood not that long ago, and he said that they just ran out of time last season, and that if there'd have been another 10 fixtures of last season, they were fairly confident that they'd have gone up automatically. And that all stems from Heckingbottom, really. And Heckingbottom came in, got a squad believing, got a squad winning games. And, you know, it's hard to argue that wouldn't have been the case if there had been another 10 fixtures last season. And as it was, they were really unlucky to end up losing that playoff semi-final against Nottingham Forest in the circumstances that they did. They started this season brilliantly as well. You know, they're having a dip right now, but in such a competitive championship, you know, as we've been discussing, it's almost impossible to go through a season without this little sort of dark cloud over you in terms of results. You know, results are going to have to turn back in Heckingbottom's favour. You know, he knows that, the fans know that, the players will know that as well. But, you know, for me right now, I don't think that there's another manager out there that could get what he's getting out of this squad. I think he's proved that he can do it. I think he's proved last season that he can get results under pressure when Sheffield United, you know, they needed to be almost flawless to get themselves into the playoffs from the position that he picked them up in sort of 16th in November, and he did that. So I think that the Sheffield United fans should have every faith that he can turn things around from this point, get them back to winning ways, get them winning games regularly, and you know, in such a wide open division, then that should leave them in a fairly strong position if he can do that come sort of April, May time.
Well, there you go, Blades fans. Perhaps not the results that you wanted to see over the last few weeks, but certainly plenty of positivity from today's show on Football League World TV, and we'll hope to see what Alfie's sort of suggesting play out over the next few weeks. Well, that is everything from myself and Alfie this morning, but we're not done on Football League World TV for the day. Later on this afternoon, Sam Rourke and Marcus Ali will be discussing whether Swansea City are serious promotion contenders this season. Are they going to battle alongside the likes of the Blades to go up, to get back, rather, to the Premier League? Well, that just leaves me to say thank you, Alfie, and thanks everyone for watching.